retired and moved to the West Coast, we stayed behind. My sister pursued a legal career as a prosecutor, while I got a job working on the power grid. Alan got a managing job at a bottling plant. For years, we lived close to one another, having dinner once a week and celebrating the big holidays at my sister's place. It was the kind of relationship where I might have had a rough day at work and would know exactly who to call about it. I was having one of those days, a late September night last year. I tried calling Jody about it, but she wouldn't pick up. It wasn't unusual. She would always forget her cell phone in her car. I decided to pick up some takeout and drop by her place. When I got there, her door was locked. I looked in one of the windows and I could see that the lights were on. There was no car in the driveway, so I was a bit confused. Using my backup key, I opened the front door, only to see my brother Alan in the hallway holding a bloody knife. He turned to me with tears coming down his face. "Call the police," he cried. "Please, call the police." Once the police got there, life took that left turn at a brisk angle. Alan was taken into custody. My parents flew in overnight. I saw the police strip Jody's home apart and place the pieces into evidence bags as investigators cataloged their lives. The working theory was that Alan was involved with some bad people who had asked him to influence his prosecutor sister to drop a case. Most of it was circumstantial. I had to juggle daily updates and demands from a dozen directions. I was going to have to testify, there was no doubt about it. I would have to tell them exactly what I saw and what happened that night. I didn't know what to think. Alan swore his innocence, but I had seen something in his eyes, a tiny spark of darkness just behind the tears. Maybe him being a murderer wasn't the whole truth, but I don't think it was a complete lie. As you can imagine, I was in a dark place. I was reeling from losing my sister, but I had to come to terms with the fact that I was about to lose a brother as well. And somewhere in all of that, I had to make sure that I didn't lose myself along the way. Now, I only touched on this briefly, but I have a pretty important job. Important, but ultimately dull. I work in the energy sector. The technical term for my role is Grid Reliability Analyst. I track how power is used to provide reliability reports and investigate outages in relation to equipment failure and weather. I'm part of a team that works with spotting inconsistencies and setting up maintenance plans. Most of my job is spent at our office, measuring and predicting patterns. Whenever something goes wrong, we can point to when, why, and where. We have plenty of people to report to, and I'll be the first to admit that this job can be duller than a rock on the best of days. But that's the thing with maintenance. You want it to be dull. It's when it's exciting that you have a problem. After taking some time off, I got back to work. I couldn't stand the quiet of staying home. My boss decided to cut down on my hours until after the trial, which was still a couple of weeks away. I had to beg him to get anything to do at all. He had decided to give me something that had been on his desk for a while, but that he hadn't had the chance to prioritize. Something that he wouldn't mind me messing up. So there was this thing that we had had for internal review for a while. There's this particular area of the state where residents have reported minor brownouts. Not complete power outages, but instances where voltages would suddenly dip. Not enough for the streetlights to go dark, but enough to reset the timer on your microwave. An inconvenience at most. These brownouts followed a sort of pattern, but they weren't mechanical. We couldn't identify any equipment failure, and the time would differ by a matter of hours, sometimes days. It had been going on for a little over 2 months, but nobody was taking it seriously. It was happening in an area where a little less than 200 people lived, so it wasn't exactly at the top of the list. This was the job handed to me as a sort of busy work. I got it with a do-what-you-can kind of attitude. I think my boss, along with my coworkers, sort of figured this was a temporary thing that would fix itself over time. And I mean, I could see why they thought so. But they were wrong. The problem affected several substations. It wasn't mechanical in nature, and it wasn't the result of hardware failure. That was the first thing we had checked. Instead, it seemed to follow an irregular pattern. And by measuring the times when the brownout struck our substations, I managed to triangulate a rough area of origin, a space just outside the town of Hilltop. I figured we might be looking at someone leeching off the grid, but they'd have to be pretty advanced to do it at this level. It was nice to get out of the office and do some legwork for once. I lived out of my car for a couple of days, going from substation to substation, talking to maintenance workers. I rarely get to flex the kind of authority that we have, so it was kind of empowering to show off my case binder and be the "I'm the one asking the questions here" kind of guy. More often than not, we're punching bags, having to answer questions about why there are power outages during storms. Yeah, I've written reports on it. By golly, if only there was a way to predict the relationship between tall trees, harsh storms, and power lines. But this case was a bit different. I didn't get that far, so I decided to do a little digging outside my usual boundaries. I drove out to that area to see for myself what exactly we were dealing with. I drove around for a bit, stopping to ask some of the locals about the brownouts. A lot of them had noticed it. One of them had even called us about it a couple of months prior. It always happened on the weekend, and it usually only lasted for a few minutes. But that's as far as I got. A dead end. There were no strange shacks set up in the fields, no illegal cables being run from the power lines, and nothing like that. I was about to give up when I stopped at the local gas station for a refill. Now, here's a trick that I've learned. If you want to know what's happening in a small town, ask the guy at the convenience store or the gas station. They see when people pull up at strange hours of the day, or whoever's buying the weird pack of condoms when their spouse is out of town. On a hunch, I asked if they had noticed anything unusual around the time of the brownouts. The guy behind the counter, a 17-year-old with black hair covering his triple lip piercing, shrugged it off. People rarely stop on the weekends, he said, except for like one guy. He always gets a Hershey bar. Curious, I asked about this weird guy who had kept stopping by. I made some notes and cross-referenced the dates with the brownouts. The guy working the counter could personally attest to this person having stopped by at least 6 times, and every time correlated with a brownout. It might have been a coincidence, but it was something. And there was one more thing. He drove a van. It was around this time that I got the trial date, and got an email about it while I was writing my notes for the report. It was short notice, a couple of weeks. It felt like a gut punch, turning my blood into ice. Like reality came knocking on the door, reminding me that I wasn't a cool secret agent. I was a sad middle child whose family was bursting at the seams. But I had a job to do, and yes, it wasn't a big deal. I was way overplaying my hand. But I had to keep myself busy or I'd spend the next 2 weeks staring at my shower wall, trying not to dry heave. This was my way of dealing with things, and I'd be damned if I just let it go because of an email. I could, but I wouldn't. Instead, I waited until the following weekend. The patterns were lining up, and I figured I would see for myself. That Saturday, I planned an honest-to-God stakeout from my car. It wasn't as exciting as it sounds, but I had an audiobook to keep me company. I don't even remember what it was. I just needed a fresh voice in my head to keep the anxiety out. I almost forgot what I was there for when, later that evening, I spotted a van rolling into the gas station. There was a man in a white hoodie and a black baseball cap with his hands in his pocket. I watched as he got him some gas and bought himself a Hershey bar. The teenager behind the counter had been right. There had only been a handful of people who had stopped by all day. This guy was an exception. Now I know that I overstepped my boundaries. I'm not a cop or a government agent. Most of my work is administrative. But at this point I was curious and I wanted a final answer. What the hell was this guy up to? I followed him at a distance. I don't think he noticed. He took a left turn out past a dirt road leading into a space between two farmlands. I kept going forward until he was out of sight and then turned the car around. I parked down the road, called up some of the folks at the office and waited. If my calculations were correct, we would be looking at a brownout shortly. After about 20 minutes, something happened. I was expecting maybe some flickering lights. What I wasn't expecting was interference with battery-powered devices. My phone got disconnected along with my car stereo. My battery stalled, but only for a minute or so. Once everything came back online, my colleagues confirmed it. Readings had dropped sharply in that area. Suspicions confirmed. I got out of the car and walked down the dirt road, keeping my phone close. I needed answers. The guy had parked in a small space between two farms. There was a small dip in the road causing rainwater from the previous night to pool a little, making the solid dirt into a muddy manure-smelling slugfest. He must have been an idiot driving down this road. There was no way he wouldn't get stuck. And lo and behold, when I spotted him, his van was spinning tires. He wasn't going anywhere. I walked up to the passenger side and knocked on the window. The skinny face of a man in his late 20s popped up, looking over the edge of a pair of thin glasses. For a moment, he seemed to weigh whether to be angry or terrified. He settled on the ladder and pressed the gas pedal harder, digging himself further down. "You're not getting out anytime soon," I said, knocking again. "You're gonna need something for traction." "Go away," he called back. "I'm with transmission operations," I said. "I got some questions about your power usage." That shut him up. He pushed down on the gas one last time, but we could both hear the spin of the tire going lower and lower. He was gonna have to get out and he was going to need my help. Even through the door, I could hear him sigh. He got out and faced me. We were about the same length, but I had a good 50 pounds on him. Something about his appearance made me think of a goat, like his nose was too far down his face. His oversized glasses seemed to agree, as he had to constantly push them back up. "You care to tell me how and why you're causing these outages?" I asked. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, looking for something loose to cram under his tire. I waved my binder at him. "I got the charts," I said, "and right now I'm just asking questions. But I might have to send somebody else to ask those questions if you're not inclined to answer." "You do that," he nodded. "Sounds fun." He broke off a plank from a fence and stuck it under his back tire. That ought to be enough to give him a boost. I shrugged him off and stepped back to take a picture of his license plate. That made him snap to attention. "You can't do that." "It's a free country." "Yeah, but my car sure as shit ain't." He stepped back out and walked up to me, facing me head on. He was all bark, no bite, and I could tell it from a mile away. "If you want to give me a ticket, then give me a ticket. I ain't got time for this." "Though I'm sure the sheriff will be glad to help you with that." "You got nothing." "I got evidence of you messing with the power grid," I said, tapping my binder. "That carries a lot of charges and a couple hefty fines." "Well, that's not my fault," he groaned. "I ain't doing that." I rolled my eyes and stepped back. I had had enough of our back and forth. "You can argue that in court." All of a sudden, his face dropped. Every hint of a smile died and a panic welled up. I could see it even in the dim moonlight. He stammered a little and followed me a couple of steps. "Now hold on," he said. I'm sure we can work something out. I don't do bribes. What about proof? You do proof. I stopped and turned. He held his arms out in a shrug. It ain't my fault. If I show you, you can't do anything, right? Not quite what I expected, but it was a start. I wasn't about to get into a stranger's van, so I stayed at a safe distance. When he opened those doors, it was like looking into another world. There was a computer set up with a 90s-style satellite dish roughly bolted to the floor. I could see a couple of cameras, some snacks, and about a dozen cables running to a handful of machines right behind the driver's seat. And in bold, neon letters just above his computer were the words, "No future." To his credit, at least it was clean. "I'm doing a calibration," he said. "That's evidence." Evidence of what? Evidence that I'm not the one doing this. Just look, all right. He got the Hershey bar from his pocket, moved up to his computer, and entered a 6-digit passcode. A blinking command prompt showed up. He put on a cheap sun-faded headset and adjusted his microphone, and then he spoke out loud. "A query," he said, his cadence slow and clear. "Am I going to eat this Hershey bar?" I heard a bleep from my phone as the battery complained. The screen flickered. Seconds later, 3 symbols appeared on the screen. I-97. "That means yes to a probability of 97%, he continued. He opened his Hershey bar and took a big bite out of it, nodding at me. "But you caused the outage," I said. My phone buzzed again. "No, I asked a question," he argued. "The system I connected to, now that's the culprit." "And what system is that?" "You tell me, I didn't make it." "Who the hell did? What is this?" He finished his Hershey bar and wiped his hands on his jeans. He rolled the question on his tongue for a bit before giving me a shrug. "Honestly, I'm about as lost as you are." He introduced himself as Kibble. He described himself as a digital finance enthusiast, running a service called No Future. Apparently, he sold financial advice online under the guise of being able to predict the stock and crypto market. "Sure," he said as he wandered around the back of the van. "I can take my own advice and earn some bucks in a couple of months, but it's way faster to just get paid for sharing advice. All the cash and none of the risk." "You sure that's legal?" "Well, technically it's not financial advice," he corrected himself. "I'm a soothsayer. I sell predictions like a psychic." "You're a crypto psychic." "Oh shit, that's a much cooler title." He tapped the sign, letting the neon flicker a little. "I'm not lying about this part though. I know future, it works. I don't know how, but it does." "How can you not know how it works?" "Because it's some satellite shit, alright. I got the login info from an estate sale. A 70s tech wizard type stuff. And that's what's causing the outage. Satellites. I told you it ain't me." I helped Kibble get his van out of the mud. I got a chance to take a closer look at his gear. His setup was very basic. An old desktop computer running Windows XP hooked up to a car battery. All the system needed to do was run the equivalent of a localized search, so it didn't require a lot. But interacting with the system was so volatile that it would fry his computer every 3 or 4 prompts, forcing him to get new hardware frequently. And that's why he drove out to the middle of nowhere. He was hoping not to damage any other electronics. Once Kibble got talking, it was hard to get him to stop. You gotta ask simple questions, yes and no binary stuff. You have to relate it to a person, and you gotta ask it about something that hasn't happened yet. That's impossible. I'd invite you to try, but you wouldn't want to cause another critical power failure, would you? He let the words hang in air quotes. I considered it. And the outage wasn't particularly harmful, and I was getting curious. I decided to humor him. "Why'd you prompt it about the Hershey bar?" I asked. "Calibration," Kibble said. "I'm always gonna eat the Hershey bar. and it's a way to see the indexer hasn't drifted to a worse slice. 97% is as good as it gets. I deliberated what to prompt it. Something related to a person, a binary answer, something in the future. All my thoughts had centered around my brother, but I didn't trust this guy for a second. It had to be something impersonal but measurable. I had an idea. Ask it if I'm going to see a dog tomorrow, I said. Prompt that. That's it, he laughed. Out of all possible questions, that's what you want to know. Just ask it. Fine, but then you get off my back. He went through the procedure again, 6-digit login, adjusting his headset. Didn't you need my name? I asked. It understands context. He turned to the computer and spoke out loud. Query. Will the person next to me see a dog tomorrow? The lights flickered again, my phone beeped, and this time something popped inside the van like a burst light bulb. The screen showed 3 symbols. I-97. And then the screen turned dark. Kibble spat and swore as he ran up to check the cables. The computer was as expected, fried. It says yes, 97% accuracy, he said. It's basically guaranteed unless you affect the outcome. So I'm gonna see a dog tomorrow, that's happening. It looks like it. Even if I actively avoid it. What can I tell ya? It points to yes. Trust the process. With that, Kibble and I called it a night. He drove off and I was left standing there with an expression on my face that could only be described as puzzled. I felt like I had gotten scammed. I checked the area for loose cables or something, but I couldn't find anything that pointed to him actively leeching off the power in the area. Maybe this system that he was interacting with was really the cause, but there was no way to know. And coming home that night, I lay awake wondering what I would have asked if I had another chance. It all came back to questions about Alan. Was he going to get convicted? Would he face the death penalty? Was he even guilty to begin with? I couldn't stop running the questions back and forth, picturing the stupid neon sign above Kibble's workstation. No future. The next day I stayed inside. I had decided that I was going to try not to see a dog. I was actively going to try and avoid the prediction of his machine just to see if I could. I wasn't feeling all that well anyway. My parents were constantly updating me with info from the trial, begging me to speak to the lawyer to prep for my brother's defense. They were adamant about him being innocent. I couldn't tell them the honest truth and that I wasn't sure. The stress of it all almost gave me stomach ulcers. I spent most of the day indoors watching old TV shows and clearing out my cupboard. I had some beef noodles and I fell asleep on the couch, putting my phone on mute. It wasn't until later in the evening when I heard a car horn that I got up. Turns out when you don't answer your parents, they come knocking. I won't bore you with the details of our conversation. They were there to discuss the trial and to scold me for turning off my phone. But what was peculiar about that encounter was something that they had brought along. It turns out they were dog sitting for a friend. What are the odds? Well, 97%, I suppose. I was gonna have to talk to Kibble again. He agreed to meet me at a Waffle House later that week. I offered to buy him dinner and he warned me that he wasn't holding back. He was getting all the bells and whistles and an extra portion for later. Strange behavior for someone who considered themselves a financial genie. Kibble was wearing the same kind of hoodie but not the same one. It looked a bit newer. He probably had a bunch of them. Kibble seemed to know the guy working at the counter and they stopped to chit-chat for a solid 5 minutes before he sat down at my table. Once he did, he seemed a little more relaxed than we last spoke. "Oh, don't tell me," he said. "You saw a dog." "I did." "You were trying not to, but you did." "Yeah, that's right." He slapped his hands together and grinned, pointing at me, and he nodded. I told you it works. No future, my man, no future. I have a couple questions to ask about your computer, I said. It's personal and very important. Well, what do I get out of it? First, I'm not turning you in, and second, I hope you find an isolated spot where you don't reset any DVD players. People still got DVD players. The DVD, microwave, Blu-ray, or VCR isn't the point. The point is that you can't go messing with people's electronics. I can help you find a spot. Go on. It was a fair deal. This would stop the brownouts and it would allow him to work unimpeded. I just had to find a blind spot. It wasn't that difficult, but it would probably be way out in the weeds. But first, I had to get some answers. Kibble told me a little bit about himself in between his massive waffle servings. He was a computer science major who had to drop out to care for his dad. Once his dad passed, he had inherited a bunch of debt. Most of the estate had to go up for auction. The only thing he managed to save was a couple of old boxes of work stuff. He used to work with a guy who was into computers back in the late 70s, Kibble explained. That guy worked with a group at Stanford. They had access to some strange shit, and some of it was boxed away with Dad's things. For the first time, Kibble looked a bit uncomfortable. He lowered his voice. I know enough to work with it, but I'm telling you, this shit is weird. I tried running some diagnostics and it's like you can't even tell what it is. Some kind of hard drive, but it's bigger than anything I've seen. And it contains magic future data. No man, it contains noise. It's like radiation, random shit. Well, then how do you use it? Honestly, I barely do anything. I got an algorithm that takes as big a chunk as it's allowed to and checks for patterns. It just works. That's it. He munched down on another waffle, shrugging my question off. That's it. I have to calibrate it every now and then and it just works. A vast majority of Kibble's predictions had come true, but they hadn't hit it big yet. While some stock and coin had increased and decreased as predicted, it hadn't been as dramatic as he had hoped. While he had earned enough to keep going, he wasn't expecting a big payout anytime soon. Giving trading tips under the guise of being an insider genius had earned him more than investing ever did, and he was closing in on enough cash to buy his dad's house. But for now, he had to keep working. I didn't say too much about what I needed to ask his computer. I wasn't sure myself. I had to get some clarity about Alan and the case, but how to form that question was another thing entirely. Kibble didn't need to know the details. He seemed genuinely curious, but I tried not to let him know too much. That following weekend, I showed him a space where he could work unhindered. There's this valley spot just southwest of the Runalong River where there is no arable land. At worst, we would be inconveniencing a couple of hikers, but it would require a 30-minute walk. Kibble wasn't too happy about that, but he had a setup that was meant to be portable. I had to drag the satellite dish though. We waited until late in the afternoon and made our way down the trail. Kibble had the computer in a backpack along with a power supply and a couple of backup drives. I carried the dish and a bag of cables just in case a couple got fried. My forearms were burning up just after 5 minutes of walking, and I was sweating through my clothes after 5 more. But we were getting there. Crossing the river while carrying electronics wasn't a big hit though, but we made it. Along that trail there is a field. According to my calculations, it was the perfect spot. We set up the computer and the power source on a big flat rock. Putting down the satellite dish felt like completing some kind of cosmic repentance, like I had purified myself in biblical labor. No way I was carrying it back. Kibble hooked it all up and input the 6-digit code. The satellite dish hummed a little as blue texture noise flickered against the black backdrop of the screen, spreading outward like a pixelated sunflower. Kibble ran a couple of pre-made scripts that in turn set up a blank prompt window. He handed me the headset. "Now, before you say anything, I gotta make sure you understand how it works," he said. "It's gotta be a yes or a no kind of deal. Something relating to a person. Something that hasn't happened yet. If you tell me what it is, I can come up with a question for you that works." "I got it," I said. "If you wouldn't mind, I need some space." Kibble rolled his eyes and wandered a bit further down the path, leaving me on my own. I put on the headset and adjusted the microphone. I could hear the static of my breath reflected back to me through the cheap plastic. I had seen him do this. I could do it. "Query," I said. The system woke up. A static reflection of my voice echoed back to me as the word appeared on screen. It was listening, but how? It didn't matter. I asked the first thing that came to mind. "Will my testimony put my brother on death row?" The words appeared and the system chugged. I waited for the 3 symbols to appear, but nothing happened. I waited for a couple of seconds and then I took the headphones off. "Kibble," I called out. "It's not working." I could hear the computer chugging along, but it wasn't doing anything. Kibble came jogging back, calling out to me. "What did you ask it?" "I asked about a verdict, a court case." "What about a court case?" "Like if my testimony will change the outcome." And Kibble came up to me, scratching his head. "So you asked if your involvement would change the outcome of the verdict," he mumbled. Hold on. That's a self-referential event." "So you did that too with the Hershey bar." "Yeah, but my outcome doesn't change when I know it. I'll eat the damn thing anyway. Same with the dog, you were gonna see it no matter what. But for this, hold on." He scratched his head, looking at the screen. The computer was still humming, the lights were blinking, but nothing was being shown. "It's a loop," he said. "It's stuck in a loop. Giving you an answer would change the outcome, forcing it to recheck the calibration. It's gonna throw an error." And then, like clockwork, it did. The background changed to a sharp blue, and then a black square as if trying to show every symbol at once, and then a barrage of text, code, line after line after line, all ending with 100%. Dozens, hundreds. Kibble turned pale. "That's impossible. It's all outcomes, all of them." "What?" Kibble hurried up to the computer and pulled the plug. That didn't stop the symbols from running down the screen, line by line by line. "Nothing ever gets 100%. Kibble muttered. "It can't. It's impossible." I blinked. Something was wrong. I thought back on that night, and the keys in the door, the click of the lock. But this time when I opened it, it wasn't Alan standing there. I was. I'm holding the knife. I looked down at Jody. Behind me, the front door opened and I turned around to see Alan. "Call the police," I cried. "Please, call the police." Looking back down, it's not Jody on the floor. It's my mother. I blink and it's my father. And then it's me. I'm lying in a pool of blood, looking up at my sister standing over me with a knife. And then at my brother. The knife changes and I do too. Brother, mother, father, me, a kitchen knife, a bread knife, steak knife, a cut across my throat, a cut across theirs. In one breath we're wrestling over the living room couch, and in the next she's standing in the street screaming for help, trying to hold her insides in place. I'm stabbed in the gut crying out for help. I'm standing at the door calling the police. I'm holding the knife not knowing what to say. Call the police, please call the police. Sometimes there's another person there. Sometimes it's someone that I know, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes they flee out the back just before the front door opens. Sometimes it's my knife, sometimes it's theirs, but there is always a knife. I'm standing over her, plunging the knife into her stomach. That time I was angry, another time I'm sad. Sometimes as I die, I forgive him, or her, and sometimes I don't. But I'm always scared. always dying. 100 voices speak out to me at once, on the floor, from the kitchen, from the door. It's a loop, they say. It's all coming true. For a moment, I can feel grass on my face. I see Kibble in the distance, smacking the side of an old screen, trying to get something to reset. He's screaming, but the noise just echoes back into another dying victim. I'm holding my stomach. There's blood. I'm holding my breath. No, I can't breathe. I'm laughing. I'm crying. Then we're sitting on the couch, just Jody and me. In that one instance where everything went as planned and we shared a box of takeout food. Just a long workday coming to an end. Where she opened the door and that was that. No left turns, straight roads ahead. The canvas texture of her cheap living room couch brushes against my fingertips. The condensation from my drink leaves a spot on our table. I forget to use a coaster. And then something burns in me, something blue and then black. A square, every symbol at once. Error, error, error. The TV catches fire, the takeout box is razor blades. We strangle, burn, cut, scream. On the floor, in the hallway, in 100 places, in 100 ways. I'm killing, being killed, and watching it at the same time as figures blend from one to the other, as a perfect amalgamation of possibilities emerge into blending, bleeding figure. The average of outcomes of all we could have been and done. Killer, witness, victim. I'm killing me as I watch. It looks like me and her and him and the others. There is so much blood. Please, call the police. Something slaps me. It takes a couple of seconds for my eyes to uncross. There are so many faces, but they end up looking like Kibble. He is sweating like a pig standing above me. I'm in the grass and he's shaking and eating a Hershey bar. The world slowly grows solid. Apparently all it took for the system to reset was recalibration. A Hershey bar. Kibble sat down next to me, wiping his forehead. Holy shit, he wheezed. Holy shit, it worked. What did you... Before I finished my sentence, something stung me. I touched my stomach with my hand and drew back a little blood. I had a cut on my stomach, nothing big. You didn't ask it right, Kibble said. I told you, you have to do it right. I gotta know, I whispered. I gotta know who did it. It took some convincing, but I made Kibble ask a final query. This one didn't turn out all that bad. If I testify against my brother, will my sister's killer face justice? I got a straight answer. 94%. It's almost a certainty. But can you accept those odds when it comes to murder? I'm not sharing what it said. That's for me and my brother to know. Just know that it was certain. Kinda. My father had a seizure on that night and almost ran himself and Mom off the road. My brother got taken to the infirmary after some kind of psychotic break. And when I had my moment in court, I lied to the jury. I said that I saw some things that I didn't. In the end, that's what got him convicted. I had to do it. The scar on my stomach healed, but it still hurts when I think about it. Not a physical pain, not an imagined one either. Not a pain at all, really. It's more like a memory of something. Sometimes I can look down and imagine a knife plunging into my gut. Sometimes I'm the one holding the knife. It's like there's a part of me that's still processing the result. Looping. As far as I know, Kibble is still working on No Future. I think he got the house by now. He's not answering my calls, and I think that's for the best. Whatever he's working with isn't natural, or maybe it's more natural than I'm comfortable with. I think I've heard somewhere that perceiving something can change the outcome. Maybe there's something to that. Not only when looking at the future, but at things that were. I've done what I had to do and said what I needed to say. I know for sure what really happened. If the outcome has changed since, that's not my fault. I'm not a killer, not a victim. and 94% is not a certainty. I don't care if the ache never goes away. I know my future,